Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world today. So, you probably signed on expecting to hear Kyle Sutton, our Director of Marketing, lead you through this, be your host and lead you through this webinar today. I am clearly not Kyle Sutton. I am Tracy Trotzier. I am the Global Marketing Manager here at SolarWinds MSP, and I'm responsible for taking care of all our customer marketing. Today, our session is on managing your cash flow and maximizing your profits during COVID-19. And I'm really pleased to welcome Rayanne Buccianico to our session today. Before we get started with the presentation, just a couple of housekeeping things that we need to run through. Rayanne, if you could move to the next slide. Perfect. So this session is being recorded. And as always, all of our attendees are on mute today. It's not because we don't want to hear from you. It just helps us ensure that we have a really great audio experience for everybody. If you have any questions that you want to ask, please use the question and answer panel to do so, and we will be answering your questions throughout the session today. As always, if you have any issues with audio or video, please let us know and we'll do our best to fix those for you. One thing we've noticed in this time of increased usage of platforms like GoToWebinar is it's often a better audio experience if you can dial in from a hard line, so from a POTS phone. If you do lose audio, please try and dial in. Otherwise, let's get started. So Rayanne, welcome. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Tracy, so much, and thanks to everybody who is who's joined us today. My name is Rayanne Buccianico, and please just call me Rayanne. It's a lot easier. Don't try to pronounce my last name, but Tracy, you did a fabulous job, by the way. Who am I, and why am I here? I am an enrolled agent, and that means that I'm eligible to practice before the IRS in all 50 states in the United States. I'm an accounting professional. I am the owner of ABC Solutions. We are an accounting firm in Clearwater, Florida, and we specialize in working with the MSPs around the US and Canada, helping with like chart of accounts, understanding financials, understanding and measuring, financial metrics and profitability, that sort of thing. You may have heard of a company called Sell My MSP. I am a partner in Sell My MSP. That's a listing service. We match buyers of IT firms with sellers of IT firms. So that's Sell My MSP. And then I also do a podcast, and it's called PSAimpact.net. PSAimpact.net is our website. PSA Impact is our podcast. My friend Chris Tim in the UK and I talk about ways to optimize your MSP using your PSA, things like automation and other workflow types. So you may also see some of my articles around in various publications, or see me speaking at in places like ASCII or Channel Pro. So that's who I am. Tracy, did you have any questions for me before I get started?
Nope, I think we're ready to rock and roll, Rayanne.
Okay, so anyway, again, welcome everybody, and I just want to run quickly through some of the topics I want to cover today. The first thing I want to do is talk about like an overview and an overall perspective of what is going on in the world today. And so just some of Rayanne's, brain dump thoughts. Then we're going to really dive in, and how you can focus your efforts, firm up your income streams, scrutinize your spending. We're going to talk about accounts receivable in terms, and what you should be doing right now in your MSP to make sure that you stay relevant in your community. And then finally, we'll have some Q&A. But before we get started on all of that, we have a quick poll question. So let us know, are you currently experiencing any cash flow issues? Has there been any change in your cash flow as a result of this?
So while the results are coming in, Rayanne, what are you hearing from your clients in your practice?
So there's a lot of, I am hearing a lot of different things, and I think the poll is, is starting to show that there's a split right down the middle.
Yeah.
There are many MSPs that are currently not yet experiencing any downturn in cash. Their customers aren't changing they're not changing their services. They're not, renegotiating contracts, but some others are, and you may find that some MSPs, especially those that have a specific vertical and that vertical has been shut down, we know that they are struggling, to try and keep their people on payroll, keep the bills paid, and figure out what they're going to do next. Like for instance, I have one client that, they specialize in working with dental practices. They support things like the SoftDent and the Dexis, line of business apps, and help manage the dentist offices, for like the entire tri-state area. And they, and we know that dentist offices are closed. And so they are struggling because the dentists don't have any money coming in, so they don't really have any use for the computers and the systems that are in place. So, so they're starting to renegotiate a bunch of different services because it's not like you can clean teeth from home, right?
No, not at all. So the results that we see from the poll today would follow right along with that. So 51% of the folks online today are experiencing some cash flow issues and 49% are not. So with that, let's continue on.
Okay, so I do have some tips for those that are not experiencing a cash flow. But before we get started, I really just want to take a step back and let's talk about perspective. Okay, so what you're seeing on the screen is you're seeing a little chart that kind of shows what the Dow Jones Industrial Average has done over the last 10 years. And you can see that we had a big dip in 2020, right? Over here on the right. But as you can see, we're still, 15,000 points higher than when at our lowest point in 2009. We're even, a solid 10,000 points higher than before the market even crashed in 2008. So just a little bit of perspective. If you use the Dow Jones Industrial Average as any sort of gauge as to what's going on in the industry, then what we're talking about here is a market correction. And I've often said, as I was watching, the Dow Jones, go up and up and up, and it started to really, get close to that 30,000 point mark, I thought, there is no way that this is sustainable. Something's going to happen. And sure enough, it did. And the most important thing that you need to remember is don't panic. So if you start to feel that, holy smoke, what do I do next? And you start getting into that panic mode, stop, take a deep breath, go meditate for 10 minutes, because nobody makes a good decision when they're in panic mode. So just stop, back off, and then come back and visit it later once you are more calm, and then you can make a new plan. And so what will that plan look like? Well, it's estimated that most companies can expect a 33% decrease in their revenue in 2020 from 2019. Now, if you were if you had the best year in your life in 2019, take 67% of that, and that's probably what your 2020 is going to look like, unless you're in one of those really super hard hit areas, either the ones where, like New York City, where you absolutely can't leave your house and all businesses are closed down, or you're in one of those verticals that tend to, like I was talking about the dentist offices, if your company is really suffering, you may experience a lower amount. But on the average, expect, before even going into this thing, expect that your income, your revenue is going to dip by 33%. So then what do you do? And so I've got like 4 or 5 different topics I want to touch on. And the first thing I want to talk about is focusing your efforts, right? So where you focus goes, your energy flows, right? So remember what you do and try not to deviate too much from it. You know, if you are a specialist in security or Azure or cloud hosting or whatever your specialty is, try not to deviate too much from that. You don't want to really get outside of your comfort zone. If you have extra time, it's great to get out there and learn new things. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, don't spread yourself too thin, by trying to offer all services to all people like it's your first day in business, right? You start up your business and you pretty much take everybody that comes in off the street, any dollar that walks in, that's your customer. That's not what you want to do right now. You still want to be able to maintain your specialty, and because when this thing is over, you want your business to pick up and carry on, as it always has, and you're not going to want a bunch of those accounts. The interrupt-driven life, so this part is really hard. Everybody's working from home, including you. And so one thing you want to do is while you're trying to work, whether you are building a plan, you're working on your finances, you are, coming up with, work for all of your teammates, try to reduce the interruptions, close your door, turn off your phone, close down your Outlook, and you've got children at home, try to stop the, hey, can I have a snack? Can I have a snack? I'm thirsty. Just block out the time that you need in order for you to stay focused. And you want to focus your efforts on where are your profits. Do not lose sight of your finances. Yes, I know I'm an accountant, and that's my job, is to try to talk to you and push the finances, but you really want to stay focused on your profits, your customers, and your cash right now. And if there's a dip in your net profits or a dip in your gross profits, you need to know that right now. So communicate with your customers and your community. One of the things that you can do is you really want to stay relevant in your community, and so continue to talk to them. Call your customers on a weekly basis. I was talking with an MSP yesterday, and she picks up the phone and she calls each one of her customers every week, just checking in. How are you doing? How's business going? Are you seeing a dip? Find out what's going on with your customers, and also what's going on in your community, and you should be proactive. Don't wait for them to call you to say, I need help, because they've already done that. They called you when they had to send all of their employees home and keep them connected. And so, you answered that. And now what you want to do is follow up. Hey, how's it working? How is Susie doing with working from home? I know she's used to working in the office because, she's a receptionist. Some of the people are going to really, really struggle with that transition. Maybe you can offer little, Zoom lunch and learns or something like that, where you can teach them how to do things, and start to market your specialty. And get onto the social medias and, and explain, educate people on why your specialty is so relevant right now that they should not be overlooking it. So now I have a second poll question. How often are you reaching out to your customers to see how they're doing?
So,
Uh,
Ryan, do you
mhm.
recommend that MSPs reach out via just phone? Since we can't socially see people, what about emails, other things? How do you think? What are your recommendations?
So I recommend any way that you can get in touch with your clients, your customers, do it. Understand that everybody's communicating through emails right now. So if you're going to use an email, make sure that you follow up if you don't hear back from them. Then you could follow it up with a phone call. Other people are using Teams. MSPs out there are setting up, team channels so that they can communicate with their customers through Teams. So use the tools that you're selling in order to communicate with them. I'm a Slack user, right? So I have a Slack channel for my clients so that I can communicate with them. They can communicate with me. We can send files back and forth and so on and so forth. So how did we look?
So looking at the results, it's encouraging. I think we have 43% of the respondents today are reaching out to their customers already weekly. 36 are doing it monthly, and we have about 21% that are between not yet and no plans to reach out.
Wow, that's interesting. Those the ones that are doing it weekly, you're telling your customers you care about them as a business and not just about the money that's coming in. And and even monthly is a good way, to just check in. How's it going? How's it going? If you haven't yet done it, consider doing it, because let me tell you why. Um, if your customers are out there and they're seeing other IT people, promoting, a Zoom chat or checking in on people or offering up free information, they might sit back and say, hey, I'm not getting that from my IT company. Maybe I should look into this other company. They seem like, they know what they're doing and they care. And you never want your customers to ever think for even a minute that you don't care about them. I mean, you deal with vendors, and you know what it's like when you feel like a vendor doesn't care about you. That's what you are to your customers. You're a vendor, and they want to make sure, but if you're going to be that, and I'm doing the air quotes, trusted advisor, they need to know that they can trust you. So the next thing I want to talk about is firming up your income streams, and this kind of goes hand in hand with communicating with your customers. So one thing that you want to do is evaluate your bundles, right? So what are the things? What are the services that are most valuable to your customers? What do they need right now? Do they need the bells and whistles and glittery, pretty things, or or are they really more interested in what is solid, what is secure, and what is functional? And so I'm not suggesting that you tone down all of your services, but make sure that they're being used. If you're not selling them to a customer, or if your customer isn't using it, then I think everybody's wasting their money. So if you're doing one of those all-in seat pricing, here's all of these wonderful things, and you're just going to pay us X amount of dollars per month per seat, take a look at what's in them. How valuable is it to your customer today? It may have been valuable, super valuable to them, 2 months ago, but is it as valuable to them today, or is it even more? Like Office 365, for instance, I don't know. I honestly don't know if people could work remotely as efficiently as they are without Office 365. And so if you have any customers that, have not jumped on that yet, and converted over, maybe now's the time to talk with them about, hey, it's not going to cost you a great deal of money to move. But so take a look at your contracts and your agreements, and adjust them as needed for the customer. Do they have a bunch of computers sitting in a corner, unplugged, unused? Can you reduce the number of seats? Can you reduce the number of services? And I was talking to somebody yesterday that because we were discussing the concept of reducing seats. Well, that's great as long as you're paying your vendor on a per seat a per seat basis, right? If because when I was using SolarWinds, and if I added a seat, I would get charged. If I removed a seat, I would my bill would go down. But the person I was talking to yesterday they have 1,800 seats with SolarWinds. So, it doesn't matter if the customer reduces seats, their bill remains the same. So you want to be careful about which services that you start to scale back for your customers. Make sure that it's going to be reflected dollar for dollar on your gross profit. And I can't stress this part enough. Do everything in your power to not reduce your margins on these things. I've talked to a number of MSPs whose customers say, I need you to cut your prices by 25%, because coronavirus. And, they're still using all of the same computers. They still want all of the same services. They just want a reduction in fees. And that's not right. So I know you don't want to lose your customers, and you probably won't, because it's quite difficult to change IT providers, especially when you have to interview somebody, a new IT provider, through a video chat. So don't reduce your margin wherever possible, and see if there's another way that you can help them reduce their costs without, and hoping that your costs would also reduce, proportionately. So, and let me just point this out. Your vendors, they're already doing this. I've seen a number of posts on social medias. These vendors are contacting me and they're trying to sell me on stuff, because they're acting like nothing is going on and nothing has changed in the IT channel. That's not exactly what they're doing. They're trying to determine what their income stream will be. They want to know, do you have everything that you need? Is there anything in our stack that you could add that could help your customers? They're trying to narrow down exactly what their income is going to be so that they can, make their plans accordingly. And this is critical to determining your future cash flow. If you don't know how much money is coming in the month of June, how are you going to possibly plan, for your business during the month of June until you get there and you say, hey, where did everybody go? How come my money's not coming in? I've one MSP that I spoke to, and they had a customer, it was a $4,000 a month customer, and they just closed their doors. They couldn't work anymore, so they closed their doors. They stopped payment on the MSP's monthly bill, and they shut off the credit card. And so, so now the MSP is out of this $4,000. The $4,000 from, the month where they were actually providing services, and then they were and now they're out, the $4,000 per month going forward with this customer, and again, the only way that you could possibly know this is by communicating with your customers. How are they doing? What are their plans? What changes are they making in their businesses? So if you take anything away from this today, firm up your income stream. You need to know where the money's coming from. And then once you understand where the money's coming from, you can start to scrutinize your spending. Review every subscription and vendor payment. I spoke with somebody today, and they had 7 or 8 different Adobe charges during the month of March. Well, it turns out 2 of them weren't going to anybody. They were unused licenses that had gone unchecked. And the customer that had bought them originally had left, so they shut off the contract. They haven't been charging the customer, but they forgot to turn off the Adobe licenses. So take a look at every subscription and every vendor payment. And if anybody here is a QuickBooks user, I built this report, which is a great report. So I built this report where you can run a list of all of your vendors and see, and spread it out by month, right? So I've got a list of vendors on down the left side, and then across the top, the columns are January, February, March, and April. Who are you paying money to every month? And look at them, and drill down into them and see, and make sure, you're getting, full value for all of the subscriptions, and that you don't have, subscriptions still hanging out there that you're no longer using. And once you take a look at those subscriptions, is it being invoiced to a customer? Is it an internal used subscription, or is it being invoiced to a customer? Do they need it? Or do they even want it? Of course they want the Office 365, but are there any other subscriptions out there that maybe they don't need right now? And so once you start to go through some of your spending, and I can't stress that report enough. So I was talking with an MSP, and she said, if I could only just see a list of all of my recurring, my recurring payments, what happens every month, by vendor. And I was like, hey, hang on, I can build that. And so, it's a nice, simple, quick, we'll call it a sanity check, to make sure that you are getting full value for everything that's coming out of your bank account. And then once you do that and you go through, you scrutinize your contracts and your subscriptions, so then you're going to determine your new gross profit. And like I said before, most companies can expect a 33% decrease in revenue from 2019. And if you have your income streams firmed up and you know what your gross profit margin is, generically speaking, then you can come up with actual numbers. Hey, my gross revenue, I've firmed up $50,000 per month, and at least for the month of May and for the month of June, that I'm certain of, and if my gross profit margin on the average is 25 or 50%, then now I have $25,000 of a gross profit. And that is the number. And that's the number that you are going to use to determine, sorry about that, that's the number, the $25,000 is your new budget for your fixed expenses. And so in a minute, we're going to take a look at some of the things you can do for your fixed expenses. But if you don't have your income streams firmed up, you can take your 2019 revenue, multiply it by 0.66, and that's going to give you an estimate of what you can expect. And if your gross margins did not change, take your new gross revenue number and calculate your new gross profit. Because that's what you're going to have left to spend on your expenses and your profits. Okay, next up, yes, I'm an accountant. You knew I was going to throw a P&L up on the screen, right? Don't act surprised. So, so what you're going to do now that we know how much money you have in gross profit, we now know how much that we can afford to spend on a monthly basis. So what you want to do is you take your P&L, and this is a QuickBooks P&L, and if you run it for the year to date, and then you can choose the columns and just choose months, and so it will break out, the expenses, the entire P&L by each month side by side. So it becomes real easy to look at. And so you're going to want to start to, go down the list. And of course, if you're in QuickBooks or Xero, you can probably drill right down on these numbers and, and hey, okay, so here's dues and subscriptions in January, and it looks like it got cut back, dramatically for February and March, right? So if you have, big numbers like staff meals here, maybe, well, of course that's going to get cut back because everybody's working at home, unless you're sending everybody, Blue Apron subscriptions to their house or something along those lines. So start to take a look at all of your different expenses, and just, kind of drill down and see, is the product, is it being used? And is it really necessary, based on your new work life? Are there any subscriptions out there that can be reduced or eliminated? My favorite story is I was working with an MSP, and they said, I was kind of going through the expenses, and I said, you know, Experts Exchange, do you get a lot of value out of that? Because I've considered, signing up for Experts Exchange, and he just looked at me and said, who are they? And I said, well, you've been paying them $12.95 a month for probably the last 2 or 3 years. I'm assuming, that. He says, I think I went on that forum once a few years back, and I had to pay for a subscription. I had no idea I was still doing it. I said, well, then let's go ahead and cancel that one because it's obviously not that important. So take a look at your subscriptions. Make sure that you're getting value out of them. How about your marketing? So if you look at the marketing, and you want to make sure that you're getting full value out of it, right? So I was talking to one MSP, and they are using a marketing company to manage their Bing AdWords and the Google AdWords, and so that was really important to the MSP. But I talked to another person, who had been paying this marketing company the same amount, a couple $100 per month, month after month, and never once opened up one of their, packages. And so, if you are paying, for marketing dollars, make sure that you're getting your marketing value out of it. If it's piling up in the corner of your office, and you have no intention of ever opening up those envelopes, then how valuable is that? What are you getting out of it? Are you managing the the return on the investment? Do you know where your new customers are coming from and your leads are coming from? Are they coming from these marketing sources? If not, now is the time to start shopping for a marketing company or a marketing source that you will really use and get involved with. Marketing is a huge job, and I'm sure that Tracy, you can tell us all about how marketing is a full-time job, but it's so important, especially right now, because you need to keep your message in front of not only your customers but also any potential customers out there. So while you're going through your, look for overlaps or duplications. Here's a perfect example. I was a WebEx customer, and I was doing all of my virtual meetings on WebEx. And then I came to realize that my phone system actually comes with, video conferencing. And so I thought, well, this is silly. Why am I paying, $25 a month, for WebEx when I actually have it for free already built into my phone system? So if there are any, services that you maybe already have, and you're paying for duplications or overlaps, check into those. Review your costs side by side and review internal purchasing procedures. This is really important. Be careful of inventory and stock purchases. How much do you really need in your inventory and stock purchases right now? So be very careful about, going out and ordering five computers to keep in stock because you think your customers are going to need it, because they've been selling like hotcakes, right? With the Windows 7 end of life, computers were flying off the shelves 2 or 3 months ago. And so it wasn't unusual to put, to keep, 7 or 10, machines on hand, so that you could, have a quick turnaround. That might not be the case today. So be very selective in your inventory and your stock purchases. And, you don't want to have a room full of inventory because you may need that cash. So instead of overstocking your supply closet, Reduce your purchases and the quantities on hand that you know to just what you need. And then finally, your expenses. Your monthly expenses cannot exceed your new gross profit figure. So when you start looking at these and then you calculate your gross profit figure, if your gross profit, if your new gross profit figure, is $25,000 and you've got 26,000 in expenses, something has to go. And hopefully it's not your paycheck. So, so just take a few minutes, and scrutinize some of your spending. And it looks like we have another poll question. Are you still offering your customers payment terms? Because we're about to get into accounts receivable and payment terms. Is any of you still, paying on receipt, offering 30 days? So what are your payment terms with your customers?
Thanks, Ryan. I'd like to remind everybody at this point, don't forget, if you have questions or comments about today's session, please go ahead and enter those in the question and answer panel. Excuse me, one of the things that was brought up while you were talking about scrutinizing spending was Pam had said this is a really good time to look at your website and really analyze it and analyze the analytics. And I couldn't agree more. You should always be tying any marketing activity back to revenue, tracking to see where your leads are coming from and when they're turning into customers. And it's a really good idea to do it at this time.
Yeah, that's a fabulous tip. And of course, like I said, I'm an accountant. I'm not a web developer, but yeah, look at your website. And when we come through the end of this thing, are the services that are on your website going to still be the services that you will promote and
That's right.
sell?
Yeah.
So if you ever wanted to redesign your website and rewrite the content, now is the time to do that. Absolutely. And please, yes, if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and ask them, because, Tracy, you'll go ahead and let us know if there's questions.
Absolutely. So I've just put up the results on the payment terms. Looks like the bulk of our audience today is still offering 30 days. We do have some 25% are pay on receipt, and then 10 days is at 13%. And then there's some who have other terms, and they've entered those in the question and answer panel. So we can talk about those later.
Oh, awesome. Okay. So accounts receivable, this is just a little joke that I found, so the word invoice is too soft and friendly. We need a new word that means pay up or die. And, so accounts receivable has always been a struggle for so many MSPs. And now is not the time, to be shy. Collect your money now, and so send reminders, daily on past due invoices, and just keep sending them. If you don't want to pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I could really use, payment on this invoice. Are you guys having a problem? Tell me what's going on. But send them reminders, and then call them, follow up with them on past due invoices. We don't want your customers to feel like, oh, everybody knows that there's this big pandemic going on. Nobody expects me to pay their bill. That's not the case. You still have bills to pay. You're still providing services, and you are paying for those services that your customers are utilizing. So, now is not the time to start, or continue to offer terms. And if you are offering terms, consider scaling them back. And you don't have to do it all at once. If your terms are currently 30 days, I would put together, a very nice, letter to my clients and say, with the onslaught of the COVID, pandemic, We would like to firm up our cash flow, and as such, we would like to, scale back from a 30-day, payment terms to maybe 15 days, or something like that. Or if you're already offering 10 or 15 days, change that to due on receipt, And I always liken it to, to going to the grocery store, right? You go to the grocery store, you pick up your groceries, you go to the cash register, and the cashier, rings it up and gives you a receipt, and you pay money, right? So you pay money, you get a receipt, and you take your goods and you go home, and you no longer have, anything, any more business regarding that transaction. So your services are really very similar to that. They're using a service, they need to pay the bill, and it's not being harsh, it's just being good business. You can't go to the grocery store and say, hey, I'm going to grab these groceries, but I'm going to pay you for them in 30 days, so I'll mail you a check. That's not the way it works. Yes, and you might say, but wait a minute, we're a professional business and that's a retail shop. Okay, doctors' offices are also professional businesses. You go, you get checked out by the doctor, and before you walk out the door, you've got the receptionist up front collecting payment for your visit. And there's nothing wrong with collecting payment for services as those services are rendered without having to wait 30 days. Some of you may have very large customers that will simply not change the way they do business. I've got this one MSP that I was talking with, and and they provide services to a hospital, and the hospital insists on 30 to 45 days of, for terms. All right. Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do then. We're going to invoice you 30 days in advance. So on April 1st, we send the invoice, for May 1st, so that by the time, May 1st comes around, we should have our money in time for this payment. So if your customers do insist on a 30-day term, consider changing your invoicing policies, and invoice them 30 days in advance. And there's a ton of MSPs out there doing exactly that. And here I say you can assess late fees for invoices that go beyond those terms. And there's a lot of, apps out there that you could use to automate that system. So one of the ones I use is called Late Fee Manager. It integrates really nicely with QuickBooks Online, and it'll manage the accounts receivable. It will send out the reminders 3 days before the invoice is due, a week before the invoice is due, whatever. And then, when the invoice is due, hey, you've got a payment due today. Here, click here to make a payment. Hey, your payment was due 3 days ago. Click here to make a payment. And so it will keep reminding, and then it'll say, hey, wait a minute. If you don't pay today, we're going to have to assess you a late fee. Want to make a payment? Click here. And then the next thing that happens is that the late fee gets assigned automatically without any human intervention from you. So if your customers don't like it, you can say, oh yeah, it's that silly app that I bought, but communicate with your customers. If you picked up the phone and you called your customer and you said, hey, listen, this invoice is like 60 days old. Do you think I can get a payment on it? I know that cash is tight for you right now, but I really, really don't want this to go, beyond, 90 days or, whatever. Communicate with them. Ask them, if they need to split it up in pieces, so consider changing your terms to due on receipt, or like I said, change your invoicing, so that you get paid on time. Make sure that all purchases are paid for in advance. I was talking to this one MSP, and they gave 30 days terms on all invoices. So here's what happened. So the customer says, it signs the contract. Yeah, I'm gonna I'm going to buy, this $18,000 worth of equipment, signs the contract, off it goes. The customer, the invoice goes out to the customer. The customer doesn't pay, but customer wants the equipment to be installed by the following week. Well, no, sorry, we are not the bank of, MSP land. So first, please pay us, and we'll get your equipment ordered and get it installed as soon as it comes in. A week later, no payment from the customer. The customer closes down because of the virus and cancels the order. Now, if this MSP had given those 30-day terms and went and used their money on their own credit card to buy that equipment that they could not sell, then either somebody has to return all of that equipment and wait 30 days till the vendor refunds the $18,000 of equipment. So just don't do it. Not in times of uncertainty like right now, because if somebody really does need that equipment right away, then they're going to pay for it. You go to Amazon, you order a piece of equipment, you pay for it before, well, unless you have, terms with Amazon, but yeah, make sure that you are not offering terms on, equipment purchases for your customers. You're not a bank. And if you put it on your credit card and the customer doesn't pay that invoice in time, then you're the one who's going to be paying interest on that purchase. And there goes your profit margin on the equipment. So that is, all right, time for Rayanne to get off of her soapbox about, about accounts receivable and payment terms. As you can see, I get a little passionate about that. So hopefully, what should you do now? Now, so there's a couple of things that I want to talk about. First things first, you want to pay your bills as long as you can. Do yourself a favor and don't dig yourself into a hole by not paying your vendors simply because they said that you don't need to pay them right away. Pay your bills as long as you can, because if this thing drags on for more than a couple of months, then you're going to be in a world of hurt, if you rack up a bunch of debt with your vendors. Market your company. So get out onto social media and, and start marketing, to your community, offer community assistance, offer to put on little classes, or does anybody need help in understanding how to use Microsoft Office or how to use Teams, so offer things like work at home, tips and virtual courses. And you can do a work at home tip, in a little tweet, right? Here's a tip, here's today's quick tip, and then start to follow people in your community and get them to follow you, and put it out into LinkedIn, to your business community on LinkedIn, and Twitter, and even on Facebook, which is primarily social, but people are going to be reading it. Here's a work at home tip, and just something, short, and do one a day. As a matter of fact, you could even type up a bunch of them and you could schedule it through Hootsuite, and it'll just simply blast it, at certain intervals. Educate people on security best practices, and work with your customers, to restructure your contracts if you need to. Look hard at the internal costs cut where you can, no matter how small, no matter how small. Can I just back that one up a second? No matter how small that cut of expenses is, if you say, oh, but that's only $3, a month. If you're not using it, get rid of it. Just, get rid of it. Don't worry about the size of it. Like when person said, hey, well, what if I stopped, contributing so much money to my, my simple, then my simple IRA, that might help in, in saving some cash at the end of the month. It may not, because it's still just, payroll contribution, right? And you don't want to start cutting your payroll benefits unless, they are benefits that can't be used right now. What about Aflac? Aflac pays only when you go to the doctor. If you can't go to the doctor, then I guess you're just putting out the the premiums. But Aflac is good for those that are getting sick. Um, my In a couple of surveys, I'm finding that employees are valuing the health insurance more than their salary. Okay, and this is really important to note, and you might want to check with your team about this, right? Because so one MSP was talking about cutting, cutting hours back and cutting back salary. Well, and then the employees came back with, that's fine, just please don't get rid of the health insurance plan, because they are, at a time where there's a pandemic and you don't know when you're going to get sick or when you're going to need that health insurance, your employees need that too, so so if it comes down to having to cut salary or the benefits, talk to them and say, hey, what if we went down to like a 4-day work week? Could you survive on a 4 days of pay as opposed to 5? And can you do that for a little while until we come back? The workload is a lot lower. I want to make sure everybody's paid and everybody stays healthy and taken care of, but work with your employees, and see what they're willing to do, because I guarantee that they want their job, they want their benefits, and they want to be part of the solution. Don't assume that the employees need all or nothing. And consider, looking to cut other benefits, when necessary. So, if you have like small things like gym memberships, and other wellness programs, were really big, and people love them. But guess what? Gyms are closed. Take a look at stuff like that. Cancel it, because you can always pick it back up later when the world opens up again. Life and disability policies, salary reductions. And now is a great time to take a look at your company and build new internal procedures and standardize. If you've got the time and you guys aren't overly busy, you take a look at your PSA. Are the workflows working the way they're supposed to? Is your service desk optimized the way it should be? How about the client portal that you always wanted to get set up, or the CRM portal that you wanted to, the CRM module that you always wanted to get set up and used for opportunity tracking. Now is a great time to start learning about your PSA. I know that Datto is putting out courses. There's a webinar from Datto tomorrow on ticket categories and how you can use ticket categories in Autotask to streamline tickets, ticket creation and workflow. So now's a great time to learn stuff like this. And for those 50% of you that currently do not have a cash flow problem, there's one other thing, and I don't have it written here, but I'm going to put it out there anyway. Now might be a good time to merge or purchase another MSP in the area. So if there's an MSP nearby that's smaller, maybe struggling, you could help that person by either purchasing their accounts or merging them into your business, and get set up. Use this time to get all of your tools and systems aligned, and and so that you can come out of this thing stronger than ever before. So take a look, like the Reddit MSP, the subreddit called MSP, people are always talking about stuff like that, there. Some people are looking to buy, some people are looking to sell. And so so that is me. And I hope I didn't drone on too long, and I hope that you got some good information out of this. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. So my name again, Ryan Buccianico. We're at abcsolutionsfl.com. Don't forget the FL because I'm in Florida, and that's pretty much what I have. So I wanted to leave a few minutes for any questions, if there are any.
Thanks so very much, Ryan, for this. This was really quite interesting, and the audience has a few questions. Before we get started on those, I would like to remind everybody that if you're looking for more information about SolarWinds MSP and our response to COVID-19, we do have a special resources page on solarwindsmsp.com where we've gathered together all kinds of information from various experts on how to handle how to handle your business and communications during this pandemic. If you're looking for other training as well, take a look at the MSP Institute. You can find that at the Customer Success Center, again, on solarwindsmsp.com. So while we're going through some of these questions, Ryan, I've just popped up the last poll for the day. If everybody could take a few minutes while we're going through the questions and answer this, really appreciate it. So a couple of really interesting tips here when we were talking about the payments, right, or the terms. A couple of people were talking about, let's see, Lace said that what they do is they take it on a case-by-case basis, depending on the client, how hard they're hit, and how big their monthly payment is, and their general payment history. I think that's really an interesting way of approaching it because, if you've got a customer that has been with you for a long time, you're going to treat them a lot differently, I think, than a customer that's been with you for, a few months, perhaps.
Yeah, and also while you're doing that, take into consideration, the size of that customer and, what services, are have they bought all in with your company, so whether or not it's a new customer or an old customer, what's the overall value of that customer to you? And yes, you don't want to alienate anybody. By not offering terms, and if you know that they're especially struggling, yes, you absolutely want to talk it through with them. What can we do? You cannot continue just to keep paying for their stuff without them paying you in it, paying you for it, for your services and subscriptions. But you can work something out together with them, and they'll want to help you. They do understand that you're just as much of a small business as they are, and we're all in this thing together.
Thanks, Ryan. Adam would like to know, how do you handle tempering a client who is shut down and they can't generate revenue, but and so you're not going to be able to collect what's due, but you don't want to, put the relationship in danger because you know that they are going to come back at some point in time.
Right. So that's a really great question. What I might do is, and hopefully you're in communication with this customer, but take their services down to the bare minimum. You want to keep their emails on. You want to keep their server patched unless the server's offline. Then in that case, turn it off. If they're not using any of the machines, turn them all off. You can reinstall agents later. Installing an agent is pretty simple. So, but yeah, you don't want to turn off people's emails because then now they're really out of business. And if the only way that they can communicate, is through emails and other services that you're providing, work with them and and set up an agreement, like, I'll continue to do this for you, but at some point I'm going to need this, I'm going to need this money back. And some of them are going to survive, some of them are not going to survive. And so that's why staying in contact with them is really important. If you offer to cover them for the next 60 days, and in 45 days it looks like there's still no end in sight. You've got to come up with a different plan. I mean, even your banks are doing that. Many of the banks are saying, hey, listen, you don't need to pay us for the next 3 months, but by the first day of month 4, we're going to want all 4 of those payments. So be careful about how much you extend yourself. You want to help, but you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot at the same time.
So, really, really good points there, Rayanne, and it comes right back to what you said on one of the earlier slides. It's all, there's a lot of communication that we have to do with our customers to make sure that everybody is on the same page and that, everybody, comes away with a real strong sense of goodwill. So we've got time for one final question, and this is a really great one from Alejandro, and I really want to hear how you're going to respond to this. So we talked earlier in the session about do not reduce your margins, but then when you were talking about scrutinizing your expenses and making sure that everything's in line, you talked about possibly reducing employees' salaries. And Alejandro says that doesn't seem to look very fair. How would you message that, and how would you talk to employees about that so that it takes away some of that sting?
Right. So that's a really great question. Even though the overall profit margin, the percentage of margin doesn't change, but the dollars do. And so if you have to live now on a much smaller budget, and you're really not asking. Eh, you're not asking your employees to say, hey, if you want to keep your job, you're going to have to take 80% of what you're making now. You know, uh, when when I went through the great crash, the Great Recession back in 2008, 2009, I did not reduce my employees' salaries, but other MSPs did, and they used that, temporarily to get them through, so that at least there was still some buy-in, everybody, so there's some cash in order to keep the lights on, keep the bills paid, and stuff like that. So, Alejandro, you have put together a great question. So yes, your profit margin, the actual percentage is not changing, but the overall dollars is, and you need to figure out a way to survive inside that smaller dollar figure. If you're used to having a gross profit dollar figure of, $65,000 per month, and now all of a sudden you're finding that your gross profit is down to $45,000 per month, you've got to figure out, where am I going to chop this $20,000, so that you are not the one paying all of the expenses out of your pocket. So I don't know if I answered his question, but but it was a fabulous question.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting question as well. Well, that takes us actually 2 minutes over time. There is still some questions coming in, and I'll make sure that Rayanne gets those after this session is over. So thank you everybody for participating in today's session. I'd left Rayanne's email address up there for quite a while, and I'll be sending out the recording of this webinar in the next few days. Don't forget, if you want more information about how SolarWinds MSP is communicating to our customers and talking and helping our customers and our partners at this very difficult time, please visit solarwinds.com, solarwindsmsp.com, and go to our COVID resources hub. Thank you again, Rayanne, for a really great session today. Really enjoyed it. And thank you, everybody, for participating. And I wish you all a very good day.